Africa's rise in global technology investment did not happen overnight, and it certainly did not happen the way analysts expected. For years, major research institutions, Western financial think tanks, and global media outlets confidently predicted that Europe would remain a dominant force in technological innovation far into the 21st century. Their forecasts heavily favored Europe's long-established tech ecosystems, large corporations, and advanced research institutions. What they failed to see was the silent but powerful transformation happening across the African continent. A transformation driven by youth, innovation, new alliances, and a level of digital hunger unmatched anywhere else on Earth. The story begins with Africa's unique economic reality. For decades, Africa was seen as a consumer market, a place where foreign technology was dumped, tested, or sold at inflated prices. But while the world viewed the continent through outdated stereotypes, something extraordinary was happening under the surface. Africa was not only consuming technology, it was building it, reinventing it, and reshaping entire industries from the ground up. By the time the world realized what was happening, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Africa had crossed an astonishing $400 billion in tech investment, officially surpassing Europe in total inflows, growth rate, and projected future value. The shock was global, but the evidence was undeniable. At the center of Africa's technological explosion is the continent's demographic advantage. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth, with more than 450 million people under the age of 30. This youth population is not only large, it is digitally obsessed, entrepreneurial, innovative, and hungry for solutions that fit their realities. While Europe faces an aging population, shrinking workforce, and slow digital adoption, Africa is experiencing the exact opposite. A population rapidly embracing smartphones, mobile money, digital services, online marketplaces, e-learning, AI tools, blockchain systems, and cloud platforms. Investors realized that Africa's youth were not waiting for governments or global corporations to build the future for them. They were taking control of it. The turning point came when Africa leapfrogged traditional infrastructure. Europe relied for decades on physical banks, wired internet systems, outdated bureaucratic structures, and legacy institutions that resisted change. Africa, lacking these legacy constraints, instead built a digital-first economy. Mobile networks expanded faster than roads. Mobile money grew faster than banks. Digital marketplaces grew faster than traditional businesses. Countries like Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Egypt, Ghana, South Africa, Morocco, Senegal, and Ethiopia became hubs of innovation, each contributing to a technological ecosystem that grew not in small increments, but in massive, exponential leaps. Mobile money became Africa's first global shockwave. What Europe struggled to adopt, instant digital payments, fully mobile banking, paperless finance, Africa mastered long before advanced economies even took it seriously. With hundreds of millions of people using mobile money daily, Africa created the world's most active fintech environment. Investors saw a continent that had not only solved financial inclusion, but built systems so efficient that global banks began copying them. Fintech alone attracted over $150 billion in investments. What began as microtransactions in rural villages became billion-dollar platforms that compete with Western giants. The rise of African fintech triggered the next wave, the smartphone revolution. Smartphone adoption exploded, crossing 550 million users and still rising. This sudden digital access created new industries overnight: e-commerce, online education, telemedicine, logistics apps, ride-hailing, content creation, digital marketing, and remote work. Investors realized that Africa had become the world's fastest expanding digital consumer base. Europe's market was stagnating. Africa's was multiplying. Then came the data center race. Global tech giants such as Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Huawei, and Oracle poured billions into African digital infrastructure. They built massive cloud hubs, submarine cables, data storage facilities, and regional headquarters. Why? Because Africa's digital traffic was becoming too large to route through servers in Europe or the United States. The continent required its own infrastructure to keep up with demand. For investors, this was a clear signal. Africa was no longer just consuming data, it was becoming a digital powerhouse. Artificial intelligence adoption further accelerated this transformation. Across the continent, universities, startups, and innovation centers began training AI engineers, building AI-powered tools, and solving uniquely African challenges that Western models were not designed for. AI startups in Nigeria, Kenya, Tunisia, Egypt, and South Africa began attracting global attention. Investors realized that Africa's AI sector had something the world desperately needed: massive datasets, youthful talent, and real-world problems waiting for solutions. While Europe slowed down due to strict regulations and AI restrictions, Africa surged ahead with agility and creativity. Another major catalyst was Africa's new alliances. BRICS nations, particularly China, India, Russia, Brazil, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, began funneling huge amounts of capital into Africa's technological infrastructure. These investments were strategic, long-term, and built to create global influence. China provided hardware and digital infrastructure. India offered software development partnerships. The Gulf states contributed major funding to African startups and digital hubs. This shift in international partnerships helped Africa bypass Western funding limitations and tap into alternative capital sources that believed in the continent's potential. Europe, meanwhile, faced a series of crises that weakened its technological competitiveness. Economic stagnation slowed investment. Inflation crippled startup funding. Energy shortages disrupted industries. A rigid regulatory environment strangled innovation. Investors became cautious, choosing safer markets or high-growth territories. Africa, with its rapidly expanding digital consumer base, offered better returns, faster scalability, and a larger long-term market. The contrast was stark. Europe was slowing down while Africa was accelerating. African cities began transforming into global tech magnets. Lagos became a mega hub of innovation, producing unicorn startups and attracting Silicon Valley investors. Nairobi emerged as East Africa's digital engine, hosting data centers, coding academies, and cloud service providers. Kigali positioned itself as Africa's smart city blueprint, integrating drones, robotics, and digital governance systems. Cairo built robotics and AI research centers that now partner with global institutions. Johannesburg and Cape Town continued to lead in software engineering, fintech innovation, and advanced manufacturing. These cities created clusters of talent, capital, and entrepreneurship that Europe could no longer match. This shift also produced a cultural transformation. African creators, developers, engineers, and innovators began shaping narratives, building platforms, and solving problems for African users. Local languages, local identities, local challenges, and local needs fueled an innovation wave that was powerful because it was authentic. Investors realized that Africa's tech sector wasn't simply copying Western models, it was inventing its own. The world's most efficient payment systems, most scalable mobile services, and most adaptive digital solutions were emerging from African minds. The talent factor became impossible to ignore. Africa now produces more self-taught developers per year than Europe produces graduates. Coding boot camps and online learning platforms trained millions of young Africans who entered the workforce ready to build, innovate, and scale. This massive talent pool became the engine behind Africa's $400 billion tech surge. Europe's talent pool, shrinking due to demographic decline and rising labor costs, could not keep up. For global companies, Africa became the new destination for innovation, engineering, and digital creativity. Another major force behind Africa's rise was the shift in mindset among African governments. Many administrations began implementing policies that encouraged startups, protected digital innovation, and opened the door to foreign investment. Rwanda eliminated unnecessary regulations to attract tech giants. Kenya supported digital taxation and startup frameworks. Nigeria launched innovation funds and tech-friendly policies. Egypt invested heavily in engineering education. Ghana, Senegal, and Morocco created special zones for tech development. This supportive environment helped transform African nations from passive participants into active architects of their digital futures. What truly shocked Europe and the broader Western world was the speed of Africa's growth. Analysts expected Africa to become a rising tech market by 2040. Instead, Africa overtook Europe in 2025, more than a decade earlier than predicted. European newspapers published headlines expressing disbelief. Investors rushed to study the data. Technology conferences that once ignored African innovators began placing them at the center. Companies that once dismissed Africa as a secondary market now recognized it as a global leader. The impact on Europe was immediate. Europe's tech ecosystem began losing talent to African cities offering better opportunities, faster growth, and more creative freedom. Startups began relocating or forming partnerships with African hubs. European investors shifted their portfolios to African companies. The balance of technological leadership, once thought to be firmly in Western hands, began tilting south. Africa's achievement carries profound implications for the global future. With $400 billion in tech investments and exponential growth, Africa is now positioned to build global digital champions. The continent will soon produce its first global tech titan, a multi-billion-dollar corporation born in Africa and serving the world. The digital economy will create millions of jobs across software development, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, blockchain engineering, robotics, biotech, and digital infrastructure. More importantly, Africa will influence global standards, global technologies, global platforms, and global markets. The world's next major innovations may come from Nairobi, Lagos, Kigali, Cairo, Accra, Johannesburg, or Dakar. Africa's ideas will shape the next generation of digital solutions. Africa's rise is not just about numbers. It is about transformation. A continent once underestimated has become a center of innovation, energy, and technological ambition. The $400 billion milestone is only the beginning. The world is witnessing the birth of a new technological superpower built not on imitation, but on originality, resilience, and a fearless drive to invent the future. Europe now faces a new reality. Africa is no longer behind. Africa is no longer catching up. Africa is leading. And nothing could have prepared the world for the moment Africa overtook Europe in tech investment. The surprise is real. The numbers are undeniable. And the message is clear. Africa has entered a new era. An era of ingenuity. An era of digital dominance. An era that the world cannot ignore. The $400 billion tech surge is not Africa's peak. It is Africa's beginning.